Last September, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced Canada had credible intelligence that the Indian government may have played a role in Mr. Najjar's killing. But BC RCMP had little information to share on that facet of their investigation when they announced those 3 arrests on Friday. So I spoke with RCMP Commissioner Michael Duheme earlier today. Have a listen to our conversation. Hi, Commissioner. It's good to see you here in studio. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Vassy.
And congratulations on your appointment as in a more permanent sense as Commissioner. You served obviously as interim for a while, but congratulations on it becoming permanent. I do want to start off on the big news of late last week, and that is the arrest of 3 individuals in the case of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And in particular, I wanted to ask you if you could illuminate Canadians as to why it did take almost a year to lay charges.
Well, I'd say, Vassy, first I got to highlight the excellent work from IHIT, the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team that's part of Lower Mainland, as well as other units like a National Security Unit that was involved, and other units and partners and provinces that were involved. Investigations are complex. Sometimes pieces will fall together where you can solve it very quickly. But some others are more lengthy in time, and you have to make sure that you cover the elements of the offense as you move forward. And I just want to remind you that the investigation is still not over, because you got to remember that these 3 individuals were arrested. But as with any investigation, there's sometimes follow-up investigations that stem from that, and I'm not going to get too far down the road in that because the matter's before the courts.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I do remember very specifically the superintendent speaking to that fact that there are, that this is still ongoing. And I know that because it's before the courts, you might be somewhat limited. I wonder, in broad strokes, can you, though, tell Canadians who are watching right now what the more is? Like, what else is left to investigate, what the parameters of that investigation still are? Do you believe, in essence, that there are still other people who were responsible for this murder?
Well, we did say that it's the Assistant Commissioner, Dave Tabul, who's the Assistant Commissioner responsible for federal policing of the Pacific region. He did say that we do have separate and distinct investigations looking at the connection to the government of India. And the other part of that is, again, I'm not at liberty to expand, but when you look at the steps that were done, the arrest and the information that was seized, that could lead to the investigation or arrest of other individuals. So that's about as far as I'm going to say about that.
May I ask why they're separate? I think, and I'll tell you why I'm asking, because it was all very connected when the Prime Minister announced to Canadians that he had credible intelligence. He had seen credible intelligence linking the government of India to exactly what you just talked about. So why the need to separate?
Well, you got to understand that the elements of the offense in which the 3 individuals were charged are based on the investigation from IHIT. If anything came out of that that warrant an additional investigation, it would be treated separately.
And so basically what came out of that is a potential link to the government of India? Am I fair to assume that?
Well, I'm not quite sure if it's directly with regards to that or other information that came in. But
you're not sure of that?
Well, I would not expand on that because, like I said, the matter's still before the courts, and there's some information that would be disclosed through the court process that would highlight some of the work that's being done. Some
of the members of the RCMP who were at that press conference, when speaking to the possible connection to the government, also spoke of the challenges in that investigation. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, the challenges, we've been working with the National Investigation Agency of India for the last several years, not necessarily on this particular file, but you've seen sometimes articles where the RCMP was criticizing for not taking any actions based on information that was received. And the reality is the workshops that we've had with the NIA was really to build a relationship and also a common understanding of what's required from Canadian law to launch an investigation. For example, one of the individuals during a press conference said a press clipping is not enough for us to launch an investigation. So that's a matter of educating the NIA what Canadian law enforcement agency requires to commence an investigation. And by the way, we've had 2 workshops with them, and there's another one planned in which we want to continue that relationship.
So let me just ask if I'm interpreting that correctly as well, because I think what you're referencing is the allegations coming from India about there being extremists allowed to operate here in Canada. Once again, those are allegations. I have nothing to prove them. We spoke to the Indian High Commissioner a number of months ago. He leveled those allegations again. Are you saying that essentially it's you explaining to them why you can't investigate what they're alleging?
I think it's understanding the rules of law in Canada and how a criminal investigation proceeds in Canada and how we do our work and what's required to do our work. I'll give you an example. I know that people criticize in some of these demonstrations that took place across the country with the signs that are being used. Well, the reality is, although the signs were offensive, they don't meet the threshold of a criminal code offense, which is a challenge. And in some other countries, you cannot display a sign of that nature. It is considered an offense. In Canada, it's not. Has
India been receptive to the explanations you have provided?
At our level, we've been talking at the NIA. I'm not quite sure if the minister or the Prime Minister has been talking at their level, but we continue to discuss with the NIA, and it's a matter of finding that common ground and finding the right information that we can use to move forward. Subject of interest, I would say, from both countries.
So on the reverse, and to the point that the individual at the press conference was making about an investigation of a possible link in Mr. Nijjar's murder and to the government of India, can you be explicit? Like, is that investigation actually happening?
Well, I did say that it's a separate and distinct investigation looking at the connection of the government of India. So yes.
when are you in communication? Because my question about the challenges was based on that, because that's what the individual at the press conference said, that the relationship with India in this investigation has some challenges. Can you elaborate on what those challenges are? Is there any communication back and forth about the possibility of this link, again, as the Prime Minister has made explicit to Canadians?
Yeah, I'm not aware of all the information, if any, was shared with. The challenge could be the shared information, because considering that we do have a criminal investigation that was ongoing, how is that information going to be used is a concern as well to us. So I think there's several things in that makes it a challenge when dealing with India with regards to the exchange of information as it pertains to a criminal offense.
So I spoke to the Public Safety Minister about this on Friday, and I asked him specifically about that issue. And he implied to me that it may not be necessary for India to cooperate with your investigation, for the RCMP to reach a conclusion in that investigation. Would you agree with that sentiment?
I think that's a fair statement, because we work closely with international partners as well. And there's some information that could be out there that could help us, and could be enough to sustain future charges.
And have you or any of your colleagues traveled to India? I ask because the National Security Advisor, the Director of CSIS, they made a number of trips over the course of their own kind of investigation. Has the RCMP made any such trips as well?
Yeah, we've sent a team down, I believe it was last year, and this is in relation to the workshops I was sharing with you, where our national security team went down to New Delhi and met with the NIA and had an exchange on processes and procedures and legislation as well. So
what about this specific investigation?
I'm not sure if information was shared during that meeting, because it was a year and a half ago. So nothing was shared, but I do believe that there's a list of common interests that was shared with them.
So nothing since, for example,
I'll
put a time frame on it. Since the Prime Minister stood up and made the allegation.
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. I also want to ask you, and this is sort of in the same vein, about linking intelligence to evidence, because when we last spoke more than a year ago, I think it was, about the foreign interference inquiry more specifically, you had highlighted that was an issue for you, and you wanted to see some legislative means of addressing it. Yesterday, there was the introduction of new legislation around national security that does give CSIS some additional powers. In your view, is there anything in that legislation that will make it easier to turn intelligence into evidence or use?
I didn't really look at it from an intel to evidence, and this is an issue that's been going on, and it's not just with the service, right? We have international partners that provide us information, and the information cannot be used in a criminal law. In the criminal judicial process. What I do see from yesterday's announcement is the fact that the CSIS Act will change, and the fact that David, the director, will have more flexibility to provide some information to universities, to academia, to the public. That will broaden awareness of foreign interference, and eventually there'll be more people in tune, aware of what foreign interference, because right now I'm privy to a lot of sensitive information, but if the information I have cannot be shared with other people, we're not really promoting what foreign interference actually is, and educating people and actually addressing it. So I think I welcome the changes for this. And
does anything of what you saw, though, make it easier for you to take the intelligence that maybe is more likely to be shared and use it, though, as evidence to actually take this stuff to the courts? Because that's what you highlighted very specifically as a concern.
I did say that. I don't think, and I haven't read through the entire what's proposed. I don't think it addresses the facility of switching intel into evidence into criminal procedures. But like I said, we do this on a regular basis with the service as to how best to use some information. How can this be transferred? Because in the criminal procedures that we have, you know that it's full and frank disclosure. So I have to start at once upon a time, and at once upon a time, sometimes that's a challenging part because we get information that we cannot disclose. But there are ways to protect that. But the provider of the information has to be willing to try and protect that. So.
In the inquiry in which you testified, the report that came out last week, the justice overseeing it, the commissioner, sort of flagged 2 instances of foreign interference in which she lent a lot of credence to the possibility that it actually happened. And in particular, that's the nomination of Han Dong, as well as the sort of race, the campaign of Kenny Chiu in BC. Is the RCMP investigating either of those?
Not to my knowledge, we're not. And
no. Do you know why not?
At the time, I think some of it was probably referred to Elections Canada. I'm not 100% sure on that. But to my knowledge, we're not investigating those because it wasn't brought to our attention.
You have confirmed to me in a previous interview you are investigating allegations around ArriveCan and Bottler AI.
Yeah, I did say that.
Yes,
yeah.
a completely separate subject. And I wanted to ask you if you have an update on how close you might be to pressing charges in those instances.
Well, again, Vassy, it's hard for me every time someone asks me how close we are. It's hard because, like I said, sometimes investigations are complex. It leads you down multiple different paths. All I can say is that we are investigating. The investigation continues, and I'm more than I'll provide an update when it's appropriate.
And I do understand the constraints you face. Here's why I'm asking, 2 reasons. It's been a year and a half since the investigation was launched, and there was a very public raid that happened just prior to Christian Firth testifying in a very public way on Parliament Hill. Are either of those, is that the latter there an indication that something is close?
Well, like I said, Vassy, I could seize a phone tomorrow and lead me through 15 different paths in which I have to explore to make sure we close all the doors before we actually lay criminal charges. So our team are doing a thorough work with the information they have. And to your comment with regards to the testimony in Parliament, whatever said in the Parliamentary Committee cannot be used in a criminal procedure. There's problems with privilege as they go to these committees. So that's a challenge. But the team are investigating. They're following every lead that we have. And I'd be more than happy to update when it's appropriate to do so.
Can we interpret from the raid that Christian Firth himself is being investigated? Like, what can you tell us about the scope of the investigation? Who is being investigated?
So I'm not going to go down who and what was seized and whatnot, but I'll just say that I'll be more than happy to provide an update when it's appropriate.
Can I ask why? Not to be rude, but with great respect, there's a huge amount of Canadian public interest in this. Taxpayer dollars, according to the Auditor General, have been greatly misused. And if there is a criminal element, I think Canadians are very curious as to what it is. I'm not necessarily asking you to, go around any laws or rules that you have in place, but right now all we know is that the RCMP is investigating. We don't know what the parameters are. We don't know who. Is it the government? Is it individuals acting on their own prerogative? Like, is there nothing about that you can share?
And I would leave it at we are investigating, and I'll be more than happy when it's appropriate to give a commentary or information as to exactly what we did.
Okay, I will leave it on that note. Commissioner, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it as always.
You're welcome, Vassy. Thanks.